Two officers thought they had pulled over just another black man, calm, compliant, alone. But the man they cuffed ran the very department they worked for, and what followed turned into a national reckoning. The hum of tires on pavement was the only sound as Darius Monroe, 47, turned onto Larkspur Lane in South Haven, a suburb just outside Atlanta. A seasoned leader with a long legacy in law enforcement reform, he was returning from a community summit focused on bridging trust between police and the neighborhoods they served. Darius drove a modest black hybrid sedan, unassuming just like him. His thoughts drifted to home, to his wife Lena's famous pot roast and the jazz playlist she'd probably be humming along to by now. But that comfort shattered when red and blue lights suddenly burst in his rearview mirror. His pulse didn't spike. It froze. His speedometer read 31 and a 40. No infractions, no reason. Still, he pulled over. "Stay calm," he whispered, hands visible, no sudden moves. He'd given this speech to young black men countless times. Tonight, he had to follow it himself. The patrol car screeched to a stop. A flashlight cut through the darkness. Another officer circled to the rear, hand resting on his holster. "You in a rush tonight?" barked the first cop, a younger officer with a hard jaw. "No, officer," Darius replied evenly. "Just heading home." The flashlight lingered on Darius's face a beat too long before darting down to his console, then to his hands. "License and registration." "Yes, sir," Darius responded, slow and deliberate. "I'm reaching into my glove box now. My license is in my wallet, left pocket." No acknowledgement came. The officer's shoulders tightened, his free hand twitching near his weapon. Darius had seen that posture before, from rookies itching for dominance. "You were swerving," the officer continued, voice louder. "Almost crossed the yellow line." "That's incorrect, sir. My dash cam." "Dash cam, huh?" The officer cut in. "We'll be taking that. Step out of the vehicle." Darius blinked. "I'm sorry, what's the charge?" The second officer now stepped in, bulkier and more aggressive. "You heard him. Out. Now." Darius obeyed, unbuckling his seatbelt and exiting slowly with his hands raised. But before he could speak further, the second cop grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. "This is unnecessary," Darius said, still composed. "I'm not resisting." "You people always say that," sneered the first officer as he slapped on the cuffs. Darius stared down the street. A neighbor peeked through her curtains, but quickly closed them. No one would intervene. Not yet. They had no idea who they'd just arrested. The squad car rattled over potholes as Darius sat silently in the back seat, wrists sore from the cuffs. The two officers in front chuckled as if this were just another night on the job. "So," said the younger one, glancing back through the mirror, "got a name, or should we call you John Doe until we run your prints?" "Name's Darius Monroe," he replied, voice steady. "Monroe, huh? Sounds official," the stockier officer scoffed. "What are you, a city councilman?" "I'm a citizen trying to get home," Darius answered. "That's all." The patrol car made a sharp turn, tires squealing. Darius pressed his lips together, calculating. He'd seen officers like this, the kind who wore their badge like a weapon, not a responsibility. He'd also been in precincts where those same officers met the full weight of accountability. As the city jail came into view, floodlights painted the lot in white. The cruiser screeched to a stop, and the back door flew open. "Let's go, hero," one officer said, jerking him out of the car. Still, Darius didn't resist. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to expose, and soon the badge clipped to their chest would mean nothing at all. The holding area was ice cold, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. Darius stood calmly while they uncuffed him, the first officer giving a mocking bow. "Welcome to our 5-star resort," he sneered. "Make yourself at home." Darius said nothing. He watched as they filed a report without evidence, without charges, without even confirming his ID. That silence would be their downfall. "Got anything on him?" the younger one asked. "Nothing yet," the other replied, squinting at the paperwork. "But we'll dig. They always slip up." "They?" Darius clenched his hands behind his back. They escorted him to a holding cell. The door clanged shut with a finality that would have broken some men. But not him. As he sat on the hard bench, memories flooded back. Years working on reform panels. Sleepless nights spent drafting accountability policies. He had joined the force to fix it, to be the change. And now here he was, caught in the very system he fought to improve. Outside the cell, the two officers laughed, unaware of the ticking bomb they had locked up. Darius stared at the cracked wall. He wouldn't break. He would wait. Then he would lead. The hours dragged. Officers walked by, glancing at Darius with vague curiosity, but not recognition. He was new here, officially appointed as South Haven's chief of police only 3 weeks ago. Quietly, strategically. He hadn't yet appeared in the media. The department's internal reform was his first mission. Ironically, this experience had just handed him all the evidence he'd ever need. Then came the sound of boots. A commanding presence entered the room. A woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and dressed in crisp uniform blues. Her nameplate read, Lieutenant Erin Caldwell. She paused outside the cell, flipping through the intake sheet. "What's going on here?" she asked. "Reckless driving and resisting," the younger officer answered. "Where's the footage?" Caldwell asked flatly. "We're processing it," the other muttered. "Meaning, you didn't review it?" They didn't answer. Caldwell turned to Darius. "Sir, do you know why you were stopped?" Darius stood slowly. "I was told I swerved. I didn't. And I have dash cam footage that can prove it." Her eyes narrowed. "Did you notify them?" "I tried. They threatened to confiscate it." Without a word, Caldwell turned to the officers. "My office. Now." Darius watched them shuffle away. The first wall had just crumbled. Lieutenant Caldwell returned an hour later, her face tight with restrained fury. She carried a department-issued tablet and held it out to Darius through the bars. "We pulled the footage," she said quietly. "Everything you described checks out. And more." Darius took the tablet, reviewing the dash cam footage on mute. He watched his calm demeanor, the absurd traffic stop, the aggressive commands, all frozen in digital clarity. "We also reviewed their body cams," Caldwell added. "The language, the assumptions. It's beyond unprofessional. It's prejudiced." Darius didn't respond. He didn't need to. The video was his weapon, and the truth was already drawing blood. "I'm authorizing your release immediately," she said, "but we need to speak privately after." As the holding cell creaked open, Darius stepped out, still composed, still dignified. The two officers who had arrested him were nowhere in sight. Word had clearly spread. In Caldwell's office, she lowered her voice. "Mr. Monroe, or should I say Chief Monroe?" Darius gave a small nod. "I suspected it the moment I saw how calm you were," she continued. "I don't know how this was allowed to happen, but I promise you, they won't get away with it." Darius leaned forward. "They already haven't." Darius didn't go home. He drove straight to South Haven Police Headquarters, entered through the employee entrance, and walked past startled stares. The receptionist nearly dropped her coffee. "Chief Monroe," she stammered. "You're here early." Darius nodded. "Please prepare the briefing room. I'm addressing the department at noon." Word spread like wildfire. By noon, over 50 officers packed into the meeting space, their eyes darting with nervous energy. The air was thick with tension. Darius stepped to the front, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. "Last night," he began, "I was arrested without cause. I was profiled. I was handcuffed. And I was ignored when I tried to de-escalate." Murmurs rippled through the room. "What happened to me," he continued, "is not an anomaly. It is a symptom of a culture that's been tolerated for too long." He paused, scanning the room. "I joined this department to fix it from the inside. That starts today. Officer Daniels and Officer Reed are under investigation. But this isn't just about them. It's about every unchecked comment, every ignored complaint, every silence that enabled it." Silence, heavy, reflective. "If you're here to serve and protect, I'll fight for you. If you're here to dominate and disrespect, pack your bags." Word of the incident leaked fast. Within days, local media picked up the story. Though Darius didn't confirm the events publicly, the department scheduled a court hearing to determine the legality of the arrest. The courtroom was packed. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder with activists, community members, and even retired officers. Darius sat beside his attorney, Angela Ruiz, a no-nonsense civil rights expert with a voice that could slice steel. Across the room, Daniels and Reed squirmed in their chairs beside their assigned union lawyer. The judge, a seasoned jurist named Harold Kemp, looked unimpressed from the moment proceedings began. "Let's get to the point," he said. "The defense claims Mr. Monroe was driving recklessly. The prosecution disputes it. Angela Ruiz stood. Your Honor, we have footage, dash cam and body cam, that refutes every line in their report. May we present it? The judge nodded. The courtroom dimmed. The video rolled. Darius driving within the lane, obeying all signs. Then, the officers' body cams. Their snide remarks, racial overtones, and total disregard for protocol. Gasps echoed. When the lights came back on, Judge Kemp didn't hesitate. All charges against Chief Monroe are dismissed. Officers Daniels and Reed expect a summons. The crowd erupted. The footage, once sealed in court, was soon released to the press. Protests erupted across South Haven. Signs reading, "We stand with Monroe," and "Reform the badge" lined the city square. At night, candles lit the courthouse steps as citizens gathered in solidarity. Meanwhile, Darius moved swiftly. He instituted mandatory de-escalation and bias training. He formed a civilian oversight committee. He restructured the internal affairs unit, ensuring whistleblower protections. But not everyone welcomed the change. Anonymous threats began appearing in his inbox. A vandal sprayed traitor across his parking space. Still, Darius pressed on. One afternoon, while walking through the precinct, a young black officer named Trey Wallace stopped him. "Sir," Trey said, eyes brimming, "when they arrested you, it could have been me. I've been trying to stay low, blend in. But seeing you stand tall," he choked up, "you gave me permission to be proud." Darius placed a hand on his shoulder. "Never shrink to fit into a system that was never built for you. We're here to rebuild it." And that, more than anything, was what frightened the old guard. Darius wasn't just surviving, he was transforming the very ground they stood on. Months passed, the dust began to settle. Daniels and Reed were suspended pending termination. The community grew more vocal, not in protest, but in participation. Citizens attended precinct town halls. Former skeptics began volunteering for community patrol liaisons. And Darius? He sat at the head of it all, not with arrogance, but with weight, a weight he wore willingly. One day a reporter asked, "Chief Monroe, would you change anything about what happened to you?" Darius looked out the window before replying, "If I could erase it, I wouldn't." Because sometimes systems don't change with policy. They change with pain. They change when those inside the system are forced to feel what it's like to be powerless. He turned back, gaze steady. "They made me feel powerless. Now I make sure no one else has to." As he walked through the halls of his precinct that evening, officers nodded with newfound respect. Not because of fear, but because, for once, they had a leader who didn't talk about justice. He lived it. The department was no longer the same. Rumblings of fear and resistance echoed in backroom whispers, but they were drowned out by louder voices. New recruits, seasoned officers with conscience, and community liaisons who now had a seat at the table. Darius established the Accountability and Equity Council, composed of officers, citizens, and legal advisors. Their first initiative, review every stop and search arrest made by Daniels and Reed over the past 2 years. The findings were explosive. Dozens of incidents echoed patterns of discrimination, baseless detentions, and excessive force. At the next internal meeting, Darius stood with a thick binder in hand. "This isn't just about 2 bad officers," he told the room. "It's about the blind eyes, the looked-away glances, the supervisors who signed off." He paused. "This culture ends here." He announced policy overhauls that shook command structures. Body cam reviews would now be routine, not optional. Promotions would require equity training, and every officer would undergo quarterly performance assessments, judged in part by community feedback. Resistance flared briefly, but it was no match for the public tide. The people of South Haven had seen the truth, and they weren't going back to silence. One morning, Darius received an unexpected visitor. Her name was Helen Monroe, his mother. She hadn't stepped foot in a police station since the day her brother, Darius's uncle, was wrongfully arrested during a protest in the 60s. Her eyes scanned the new diversity on the walls: Black officers, Latino captains, Asian American detectives. "You did all this?" she asked softly. "I'm trying," Darius replied. Helen sat down in his office, her hands trembling slightly. "You know, when you told me you wanted to be a cop, I was terrified. Not just for you, but of you. Afraid you'd change. that the badge would change you. She looked around again, her voice tight with pride. But I see now you didn't change. You're changing it. Darius felt his throat tighten. He didn't often get emotional, not in uniform. But this moment wasn't about authority. It was about legacy, about healing. And as Helen left, she paused in the doorway. Your uncle would have been proud. Darius nodded, voice caught in his chest. He knew now that this wasn't just about policy or protest. It was about restoring generations of broken trust. News broke that Daniels and Reed had hired a high-powered legal team to sue the department for wrongful suspension and defamation. Their claim? That they were victims of a political agenda. The public response was swift and unforgiving. Protests reignited, this time outside the courthouse. One sign read, "Accountability is not a witch hunt." Darius met with the city attorney, who advised him to remain neutral in public statements. But neutrality wasn't something Darius wore well. At a press conference, when asked about the lawsuit, he replied, "If holding people accountable for their choices is controversial, then controversy is long overdue." That clip went viral. Suddenly, South Haven became a national conversation. Other cities began reevaluating their own policies. Darius received calls from mayors, chiefs, even senators asking for guidance. But the higher the spotlight rose, the more enemies emerged in the shadows. Threatening messages, doctored videos, a campaign to dig into his past. Darius braced himself. He wasn't afraid of being attacked. He was afraid of what would happen if he didn't endure it, because every step forward had been bought with too much silence. Not everyone left the department. Some, like Detective Javier Ross, had seen enough to change. He approached Darius late one night after the precinct cleared out. "I used to think this stuff was overblown," Javier admitted. "Bias training, oversight boards, I thought it was all noise. But the night you got arrested, it hit me. That could have been you, or it could have been my own father." Darius listened. Javier continued, "I want to help rebuild this from the inside." Darius extended his hand. "You just did." Word spread that Ross was joining the Equity Council, and more followed. An Asian American sergeant, a white rookie whose brother had been wrongly profiled, a former military police officer who had seen injustice abroad and recognized it at home. The department didn't just evolve, it grew. Not in numbers, in character. Darius began to see something he hadn't in years. Hope. Not naive, idealistic hope. The kind that takes hits and still stands tall. The kind that changes institutions. One evening, Darius returned home later than usual. Lena had kept his dinner warm, but he waved it off, exhausted. In the corner, his 14-year-old son, Marcus, sat silent. Darius approached him. "You all right?" Marcus stared at the carpet. "Some kids at school, they saw the footage, called you a liar, said you pulled a stunt to look like a hero." Darius sat beside him. "What did you say?" "Nothing, I didn't know what to say." Darius was quiet a moment. Then he said, "Sometimes silence is smart, other times it's surrender." Marcus looked at him. "The night they cuffed me," Darius continued, "I wanted to yell, to fight back, but I stayed quiet. Not because I was scared, but because I was focused. And when the time came, I spoke with truth. That's how you win battles that matter." Marcus nodded slowly. "Does it get easier?" he asked. Darius smiled, weary but warm. "No, but you get stronger." That night, Marcus printed out a photo of Darius at the courthouse and pinned it to his bedroom wall. Not just as a reminder of his father, but of the world he was now helping to shape. Months later, Daniels and Reed finally stood trial for misconduct, false reporting, and abuse of authority. Darius chose not to attend every hearing, not out of avoidance, but because his focus remained on leading, not reliving. But on the final day, he appeared in the back of the courtroom, quietly watching as the judge, flanked by a jury of 12 diverse citizens, read the verdict. Guilty. Both officers were found responsible for multiple violations of protocol, dishonesty in official reports, and racially motivated misconduct. As they were led out of the courtroom in stunned silence, Darius remained seated. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't vindicated. He was resolute. Outside, reporters shouted questions. "Chief Monroe, do you have a comment?" He gave a single nod. "Justice is not revenge. It's repair. And we've only just begun." The statement was played on every major news channel that evening. But more importantly, it echoed in every department that had been watching, wondering if real change was possible. Darius had given them the answer. Now they had to act. 6 months into Darius's tenure, the department looked nothing like the one that had cuffed him in the dark. Community complaint resolution time had dropped by 70%. Use of force incidents were at a record low. Officers who had once grumbled about woke training were now volunteering for mentorship programs in local schools. But one of the biggest changes came from within. Officer Maya Green, a rookie who had almost quit after witnessing bias in her first week, stood up during a department-wide meeting. "I stayed," she said, "because I saw our chief get treated like I feared I'd be. And I saw him use that pain to fix the house instead of burn it down." A wave of emotion swept the room. Darius didn't speak. He didn't have to. The badge was being reshaped, not into something shinier, but something cleaner, clearer, something that was once again stood for service, not silence. A letter arrived from Washington, D.C. The U.S. Attorney General was forming a national task force on police integrity, and Darius Monroe had been personally invited to join as an advisor. At first, he hesitated. Leaving South Haven, even temporarily, felt like stepping away from a fragile new seedling, but his counsel urged him to accept. "You're not stepping away," Lieutenant Caldwell said. "You're carrying what we built here to the rest of the country." Darius finally nodded. Before boarding the train to D.C., he visited the grave of his uncle, the civil rights activist arrested in 1968 for refusing to leave a diner. He placed a folded copy of the court ruling from Daniels and Reed's trial on the headstone. "We did it, Uncle Roy," he whispered, "and we're not done yet." As he walked away, he felt a quiet fire in his chest. This wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of a movement. In the months that followed, police departments in 3 other states requested to model their reforms on South Haven's. A documentary team featured Darius in a miniseries titled The Reformers. Public trust in law enforcement rose for the first time in 5 years. But change, Darius knew, was a living thing, not a destination. One scandal, one violent encounter could undo it all. So he never let up. Weekly town halls, surprise field checks, midnight ride-alongs with rookie officers. Darius didn't want to be a symbol. He wanted to be a steward. He didn't preach perfection, only accountability. And every day he proved that when the right person wears the badge, it doesn't weigh them down. It lifts the people around them up. Years later, at a community leadership summit, a high schooler asked Darius during a panel, "What was the moment you realized things had changed?" Darius thought for a long while. "It wasn't the court win. It wasn't the national headlines," he said. "It was the day my son told me he wanted to wear the badge too." The audience fell silent. "Because that meant," he continued, "he believed this job could still mean something good, something right, and that after everything we had given the next generation a reason to hope." He stepped off the stage to a standing ovation. But in his heart, he knew the applause wasn't for him. It was for every unheard voice that his own story had helped amplify. And for the road ahead, still long, still hard, but no longer walked alone. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about protecting the dignity of the innocent. Real reform begins when those inside the system confront its failures with courage, accountability, and relentless truth.